And welcome to today's webinar on aligning your IT service strategy to the business. I'll hand over in a second to David Wright, who's Director of Professional Services, SDI, who's hosting today. But before I do that, I'd just like to remind you, please do post your questions for the presenter today using the question panel on the right, and we'll come to those at the end. Okay, and thank you to our sponsor, Landesk, and we'll come back with our listeners' questions at the end of the webinar, and David will put those to our presenter. Okay, over to you, David.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. And as Zoe's already said, yeah, it's about aligning your IT service strategy with the business. It's sometimes quite a complex sort of bag of stuff, that I think is fair to say. We've got well, I'm delighted actually to introduce our guest presenter today, Mark Carpenter. So Mark is Director of Global End User Services at Ipsen, and Mark will be sharing his story with us today. And as always said, please guys, if you've got any questions, please ask them. We'll be looking to answer those towards the end of today's event. Hello, Mark.
Hello, David. Thanks very much for the introduction.
Not at all, not at all, and I hope you're well. So a little bit more about Mark for everybody who's listening. So Mark has been working in the pharmaceutical industry for some time, over 20 years, in engineering and IT roles. And Mark moved full-time into IT service management about 8 years ago. In 2013, Mark moved into a corporate IT role focused on development, really, developing global end-user services for Ipsen. And over the last 8 months, he's implemented a number of successful best practice and service improvement initiatives, including a significant restructure of the Ipsen EMEA service desk, sort of aiming to create one coherent central function for Ipsen. So quite a lot of work, I think, there, it's fair to say, Mark. So without further ado, over to you, and look forward to listening to the presentation.
Okay, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm here to really go through my personal journey for aligning our business with the IT service strategy, or the way around, really, to get the IT service strategy aligned with the business. So I've got a few slides here. They're on Prezi, which I hope will work well over the webinar. I'll try and go as slowly as possible so as not to make people too dizzy, because the slide transitions can be quite dynamic. Okay, so the first slide here, we're really just going to talk about the journey you go from business strategy to IT service strategy. So one of the first things you need to know, obviously, is the business strategy. So we were quite fortunate in Ipsen that we started a new strategy with a new CIO called Ipsen Up. And this was well documented and well communicated to everybody in the business. You know, there was a number of publications, teams, webinars, etc., explaining to us what Ipsen Up 2 meant. It started off really as Ipsen Up, and then the second version was called Ipsen Up 2. So this was the high-level document which showed the ambition. The ambition was to double our sales and triple our EBIT by 2020. EBIT stands for earnings before profit and tax, or something like that. So there's a number of things in that: focus resources, invest to grow, geographical footprint. But one thing you'll notice, it doesn't mention anything about IT. It's all about business. So you have to try and interpret from what the business is trying to do, where you need to allocate your resources and your priorities, and what you need to put in place. So that's the kind of difficult part. My own personal involvement was not in doing that part. But we did get to build an IT strategy from that, and the senior management of the group would have met with our CIO to define the IT strategy and to make sure it was in line with the business. So, you know, one of the things you have to do is interpret the business requirements and make sure that the IT strategy is aligned with that. And I'll go through in the various slides trying to explain how you can do that and how we did it in Ipsen. So for the IT in execution, the new vision statement we put together was we wanted to be more service-based, end-user-centric, business-oriented and innovative, and ambitious and results-driven. All sounds very, very obvious, but it's good to have it written down. It's good to understand what it means, and so you know where you need to put your priorities and your resources. So I didn't actually build this IT strategy, but I did come to understand it through the various meetings we had. But the part that I was most involved in was to develop the IT service strategy. So services is one part of our IT organization. We obviously have end user services, we have application support, application development, infrastructure, performance management, etc. So we have a lot of different strands to the IT departments and IT organization in Ipsen. So we looked at the IT service strategy and came with various initiatives and priorities. And the main priority that we put in place and the main action we put in place was to actually implement some service KPIs. So we had no real service KPIs. We had no KPIs in IT at all, really, except for some local initiatives on some local sites. And so we had no global KPIs. So it's something we decided we needed to do as a beginning and on an ongoing basis in order to implement the IT strategy. So we had to build a 4-year plan. So the 4-year plan looked at the strategy, came up with initiatives, and the initiatives were turned into projects with resources and budget, etc. So we had a number of different strands to that 4-year plan. Business performance was one, and I've highlighted one area there, which is to measure the performance of the IT. You know, we wanted to measure the performance of the business. In order to add to that, we need to know what the performance was of the IT department and the IT service. IT cost optimization was another strong target. We need to reduce costs, we need to optimize and manage, and there's no easy way to do that without measuring where your resources are being used, where your priorities are, you know, what your money is being spent on. So it's something we needed to do to measure in order to optimize and manage. And then there was also an IT transformation. In order to meet all our objectives, we needed to change the way of working. There was a number of areas of improvement which was identified by the business, and there was too much reliance on senior management to make decisions. We needed to be more agile. We needed to change the organization and change the governance in order to empower people in order to meet the objectives. So I've highlighted a number of areas there that we looked at, and from those areas we came up with the initiatives. In particular, I'm going to talk today about the implementation of the KPIs and how we implemented them, how we got the stakeholder buy-in, etc., in order to align with the business. So one of the main actions that we got for KPIs, well, actually was really the only action out of our 4-year plan, which is related to KPIs, was resolve 95% of IT incidents in 4 hours worldwide. So this was the thing that we had to work on. This was our first target that we had to put in place. So we needed to be able to measure this. So there was a lot of work around this definition of an incident. So we used ITIL, you know, to help us with our IT terminology. We needed to know how to measure, you know, your 4 hours. Is it working hours? Is it you stop the clock if it's in various stages of development of a ticket, etc. So there was a lot behind this, and it wasn't the only thing we wanted to measure as well. There was a number of metrics that we wanted to look at, but identifying which metrics were important and which ones we wanted to turn into key performance indicators was a long struggle, I suppose, or a long task for us. But we wanted to also think about why are we measuring and why are we setting targets. You know, what is the main objective, the main reason for doing this? Obviously to support the business, to make sure that the users are working. But we wanted to improve the service. We didn't just want to maintain the status quo. We wanted to make sure we were getting better, we were making things better for the users and the business. And I know it's a buzzword at the moment, but we really wanted to delight our customers. So we found that we had no way to know what our customers felt really on an ongoing basis. We had periodic reviews or periodic surveys. You know, we heard face-to-face or through other means about what the users thought of us, but we had no way to measure it. So that's something we wanted to put in place. How do we measure our customer satisfaction? So there was literally hundreds of measurements. You know, when you look at the different benchmark data which is out there, you can measure everything. But you know, you really want to know what adds value to your business. And what might add value to the Ipsen business is not the same as what adds value to your business. And we also wanted to make sure we didn't have too many measurements that we were lost in a sea of data. We wanted to get the most important ones. You know, we knew there were some things we could be measuring, but really didn't give us an alignment with the IT strategy and really didn't give us important information, so we discarded them. So, as I said, you don't want to be measuring something that doesn't fit for your organization. So there's a number of things you need to consider. Your IT environment is one, you know, what kind of tools you have, what your infrastructure is like, and what, you know, technical expertise you have in-house as well can also affect what you can measure. Geography, we had a very diverse organization across the globe, so we needed to be able to measure on a site-by-site, country-by-country basis, so we knew where the resources were being used and where our users were having different issues, because the same issues in the APAC region may be completely different for a more mature organization in France. APAC region could be expanding at a phenomenal rate. It's a much bigger geographical area, so there's different things that need to be measured, there's different priorities, so this is something you need to consider. The culture of the organization is something that's very important as well. We found that one of the biggest challenges in France was the measuring people is something that they weren't used to. They really thought that it was something they were going to be measured on, and their performance would be based on these KPIs. Well, really, we had to bring some trust with us as well to show that people that we were only measuring to improve the service. We weren't measuring really to measure the performance of individuals. Although you can actually use the data for that if you want, but we were using it for improving the service. Our business needs, as we said, with the strategy of the business, our objectives that were set, you know, by the CIO, and also budget is quite important. If you have, if you're in expansion phase and you have a lot of budget to build something, you know, you can spend a lot more money on nice tools and nice information and ways to present your information. Our user needs and also the business strategy. So there's a number of things you need to really consider for your organization. Every organization is different, and what fits for one will not necessarily fit for another. So we did a lot of research through the Service Desk Institute, looking at ITIL, white papers, benchmark data, different webinars and seminars, etc. And we held workshops with the IT teams, so our application support teams, our enterprise performance management team, etc., and infrastructure teams. And we also got some key users on some of the key sites together to talk about what they wanted to see from IT, and how they perceive IT and how they wanted to see it being measured. And I think by involving these stakeholders, and I think this is one of the key points, you need to involve stakeholders from an early stage, and we got good buy-in. If you develop your KPIs in the background, you work in a small team and then present them as a finished article at the very end, you know, it's going to be hard to sell these to people. I think you need to get people on board and get their ideas and their needs first. And there's also quite different needs. I'm end user services, so I'm more focused on the end user needs and level 1 needs and direct support to end users, whereas the application support guys are completely different needs for reporting. They wanted to see how applications were performing. They weren't necessarily interested in the speed of resolution of first level tickets. They really wanted to see the number of incidents on the application. They wanted to see how many change control or how many changes were made on the application, etc., the length of time it took to get a change implemented, and the impact of a change on incidents, for example. So there was a number of different aspects we had to look at depending on the team that were looking at the KPI. So in the end, we chose 8 KPIs. It seemed like a good number for us, and I'd recommend not going too far above 8 KPIs. You can have a lot of metrics in the background that you need for data reporting for different initiatives, for example, but you really don't want to have too many KPIs that you're trying to target. It takes a lot of time to analyze the data. It takes a lot of time to report it, put it together, and then if you're sending this up to higher level management, they don't want to have too much information to digest, They really want the bullet points. They really want to know how you're performing from month to month, and something that they can get a grasp on very quickly. The other thing that was quite difficult was to put a target on some. We had some data, and we knew what the benchmark data was out there in the industry, but it was very hard to see if these targets were applicable to us until we started measuring. So we knew we put the targets in probably at quite a high level. It's not a stretch targets. We wanted to put in higher targets and bring them down rather than put in low targets and bring them up, which we thought were more difficult. So I'll just bring you back to our vision statement for IT. So because all of our KPIs linked back to this vision statement in some way. And I'll show you the first one that we decided on. And this was linked to the target that was in our strategy, was to reduce or resolve 95% of incidents in 4 hours globally. So we wanted to measure how long it took to resolve all of our incidents. As we know that it's the major issue for end users is the length of time it takes you to resolve an issue. So the longer, we could see a direct correlation in the KPIs that the longer it took to resolve an issue, the lower this score they get on the survey. So we can see that you get happy users the quicker you resolve the issues. And this is linked back to the strategy by being end user centric. It's also results driven. Another one which is very linked to this, which is service-based and end-user-centric, is first contact resolution rate. So even if your target is to resolve the issue in 4 hours, even better than that is to resolve it immediately over the phone with the user, or by a direct response by email, or even through self-service, which is is also, not only is it good for the user, it's good for IT as well because it costs less. So we put a target on this at 50%. We're currently actually up at 75% with the new services that we put in place. But with the previous services that we had in place, because of the way the organization in Ipsen was laid out with an individual service desk on each site, which meant we had in the EMEA region, we had between 18 and 20 different service desks trying to learn the same processes and same tools and share the same information. Our first contact resolution rate was very low. But when we brought in a centralized service desk, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, our first contact resolution rate has improved now to 75%. And that keeps people really happy. Now what keeps people even happier is to not have the incident in the first place, but if they do have an incident or they do have a request, if it's resolved very quickly on the first call, it keeps them very happy. Customer satisfaction. Now this was quite a difficult one to sell for some reason. First of all, the IT leadership team really didn't want to be sending a survey to users every time a ticket was resolved. They thought users would get annoyed being handed to fill in the survey, even though it's not a mandatory survey. But I finally persuaded them that it's going to be a single question with a comment box, and we used a Net Promoter Score. So Net Promoter Score is, you ask people to rate the survey from 0 to 10. There's a particular way you phrase the question as well, is would you promote this service to a colleague? And they rate that from 0 to 10, and then you do your calculation based on the detractors, passives, and promoters. We had a greater than 50 plus 50. The range can be as low as minus 100 and plus 100 is the highest range. So we had a target of plus 50. We're actually, before we centralized our service desk, we were at a plus 80, which was very good, and it was quite high when you compare to the industry average. But we think a reason for that is because our users were so close to the IT teams, because it was a small IT team on every site, they didn't want to give negative feedback. And I think that's being borne out by the fact that our customer satisfaction dropped when we moved to a centralized service desk, even though our other KPIs had improved. So I think what happened is when they're at arm's length from the service desk, where they don't know the people personally, they're more likely to give honest feedback, which we hope is the case, and that we hope that our feedback is not like for like from the previous service. But at the end of the day, as I say to the service desk when they get a negative feedback, it's something we can use to improve. If we're not getting negative comments, if we're not getting honest feedback from users, we won't know what to improve on, and we're in a mode of continuous improvement. So we always want to improve, to get better. If we're only getting positive feedback, it's very hard to see where the problems are. Resolve by due date is another one. So this was business oriented. Really, if you make a promise to the customer on a request ticket or even an incident that's non-urgent, you want to set a due date on that ticket and keep your promise. So this was one that we were really keen on as well, because a lot of times our users are not available to talk to the service desk. They're not available to have that request fulfilled. So they say, okay, I'll be in next Thursday, I'll be at my desk, could you please come in and replace my monitor or whatever the ticket is related to. So this is another very high target for us, resolved by due date, greater than 95%. So do we keep our promise to the business, because there is a lot of impacts that maybe the service desk is not aware of. If a user doesn't get their laptop fixed by Thursday, they won't be able to go and give that presentation on Friday. They might delay something else, a shipment might be delayed, or anything. So there's a big business impact. So the domino effect, as we call it, if you don't get the incident resolved by the business required date. We had some more, another three, which are process and cost related KPIs. Obviously cost is key when we're trying to reduce our costs on an ongoing basis. So we put in a strategy called Shift Left. So with our tool, we had the option of putting in a knowledge base and some self-service options. So we implemented this. We put a full knowledge base in for IT, and we also have a section for end users as well. So every article that's in the knowledge base can be published to end users, and that's something that they can use to fix a known error or fulfill their own request, for example, instead of bringing the service desk. So this is in our self-help, which is again saving us cost and money. If they're not calling the service desk, we're not charged for the ticket. The self-heal option was also a strategy to put in more tools based in the cloud, more applications based in the cloud or infrastructure in the cloud. And this self-healing mechanism is something that, we're not monitoring the infrastructure, we're not monitoring the applications, but the provider is, and they're constantly updating, fixing the problems before the users are even aware sometimes, or before we even have to do anything. Sometimes a user might be notified or might notify us of a problem, but before we even look at it, the provider has fixed it. You can see this as well in, Internet Explorer might crash when you're using it, but a few seconds later it will close and reopen where you were left off. So this is a self-healing strategy to put in more and more applications which can actually resolve their own issues. And obviously then, first level support, we want more and more issues to be resolved at first level if they can't be resolved by Tier 1 and Tier 2. And so the second level team were given the task of developing knowledge base articles, how-to guides, etc., frequently asked questions, and putting them into the knowledge base. The first level support could support a lot of the applications where they previously wouldn't have been able to do it. And when we centralized our service desk, it was so much easier to get that knowledge base up to date and to be reviewed and used, because with the disparate teams spread out amongst all the different sites, there was a different level of take-up on using the knowledge base articles. So, we really pushed the second level teams to push left, shift left as much as possible, and the same with the third level support. So because the users are generally not interested in who fixed the problem as long as it gets fixed. And if they can fix it themselves, a lot of users are actually quite happy. They prefer to go on to a knowledge base, find a quick fix rather than have to ring the service desk, who may have to call them back, or who may have to remote onto their machine, which can sometimes take a lot of time as well to get set up. Right first time. So this is another one that's quite important. We don't want users to feel like they're just being fobbed off by a fix that doesn't really work. So it prevents overzealous resolvers. It's end user centric, it's results driven, and it means that even though the service desk are given the target of closing the ticket as quickly as possible, they're also penalized if they're closing too many tickets that have to be reopened. And then there's a few others like closed versus resolved internal metrics. I won't go into too much detail on all of these because I want to get to the conclusion. We had a few more we couldn't agree on, such as tickets per user per month. We couldn't agree on a target, but this information was very, very useful when we wanted to go out to outsourcing and centralizing our service desk. At least we had data on this. We knew which sites were the biggest, the heaviest users of IT support. Reporting, we started with Excel, which was a really excellent tool. We developed a really nice interface in Excel, which was automatically updated from the service desk tool. And then we migrated that to MicroStrategy, which is the cloud-based corporate application. So did we achieve our goals? In the main, yes, we got some great dashboards. We got some great reporting with superb granularity. So we could look at the KPIs per region, per priority, per type of requests, various sites by different support groups, even families of applications, etc. So we could see where we were spending our effort, where we needed to improve. We got great trending. So the trending enabled us to see the impact over time, enabled us to see what was happening with our different initiatives. So we could see if we introduced a new application globally, we could see if it was a spike in support, if there was an impact on any of the KPIs. It was very, very good. And we could also see this top blue line here on the evolution is our feedback from the user score. So this, you could see, was going up or down depending on the other KPIs. And when you actually drill down into certain applications, you can see the correlation very, very closely between the speed of a resolution and the feedback from the users. It focused the minds. Users, so the IT teams became very aware of open tickets and backlog of tickets because they were being measured on it. Whereas before, you could have tickets sitting there for months and months. If the user wasn't shouting, the ticket wasn't being closed. We could prioritize our efforts because we had a lot of data showing us where the top 10 issues were, which regions, which applications, which teams weren't performing or were performing. Satisfaction survey was visible to everybody, and the comments we used to improve our processes and tools, as I mentioned before, we got some very good feedback from the users. And the data we used helped us build a future service model. We were able to see where we needed to put our resources, and we are able to justify and build the RFP for an EMEA service desk outsourcing project. So we have managed to centralize our service desk in EMEA, and with the data we were also able to say that the Eastern Europe, the APAC region, the Americas, it wasn't really ready for outsourcing at the moment, mainly through language issues and the geographical footprint as well. But we could see definitely we could get a huge return on investment by putting an EMEA service desk. Other KPIs we identified by going through this process, and it is a continuous improvement process. You don't fix your KPIs at the beginning and keep running with them for years and years. You need to keep adapting them, changing them, and as the company grows and changes, you need to change them. So we have SLAs now with our new service provider, so we need to put our KPIs to be in line with those SLAs. We have to have backlog monitoring KPIs, problem and change management, service desk KPIs, self-service KPIs I should say, and also now that we're monitoring telephone and email response rates, we have them in KPIs, whereas previously because of the different service desks using different telephone systems, this wasn't possible. And things like ping pong tickets, this really helps us identify problems in the processes. When you see a ticket that's gone down to 10 different teams, you know you need to do something. Okay, so we're just coming up to 30 minutes, so I think I'm just on time here just to talk about some of my top tips from the process that I went through. The first one is talk to the business. This is the most important thing. There's no point in putting something in place that is not in line with the business, or if you don't understand what the business wants. Just don't assume that you know what the business wants. Really talk to the users, talk to the senior management, and I think it's quite important. Sometimes it's not done, which is strange. Organise stakeholder meetings with IT teams and key opinion leaders. So this again was quite important to get the IT teams on board and prioritise your actions based on the business and the resources available. But you need to be adaptable based on changing business priorities. And then the last message I have is really that the business drives IT, but IT enables the business, and hopefully that will mean the business will grow and be profitable in the future. So you need to take your lead from the business, and you need to be an enabler for the business and not be in the way of the business, because you will get cast aside if you're not doing what the business needs. Okay, I think that's it from me, and I think I'll pass it over to David now to see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Mark. That's great, and a really good insight there into your approach, and quite a complex estate that you've managed to pull together to underpin some of that, and a very positive outcome. Some of the stuff that I really liked in that. So the ambition, the first off, the business direction, the goal, double sales by 2020, which is great, and what you talked about, the vision statement, understanding it, stakeholders, empowerment, which is quite key in there too. I also noticed some other stuff as well, how you sort of understood the outcome by stakeholders engagement, and then putting sort of stuff to underpin where the business is going, which is great, driven by the vision, which is really interesting too, and using information, data to support decision making, which is great. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed that. So you'll understand, Mark, we'll have a mix of IT support people on this call, service desk people, all types of people. Some with very mature services, some with less mature services. So a few questions maybe then, right? I think the first one for me is really to understand why. Why does the service desk or IT support need to align its strategy to the business? I think you covered it off. I just want to tease it out again. So service desk is there to fix stuff, it's there to fulfill stuff. Does it need to, or does it have the time to do all this?
Yeah, well, I think for us, we couldn't keep doing what we were doing. You know, we had some of our users were quite happy with the existing situation where we had a service desk at proximity location. You know, they were very happy, but some of the users weren't because they had a poor performing desk. You know, maybe people are very inexperienced, or maybe you know, who are there a long time. So it wasn't consistent, and we found that the inconsistency was causing a lot of problems. Some sites were happy, some weren't. So we needed to align to the business to provide a consistent level of service going forward at a changing pace. You know, some sites were adaptable and they were changing with the times. Some sites were not. So it was quite difficult. It was like herding cats, I suppose, with our current support desk. From a personal, you know, Ipsen point of view, our service desks were not fit for purpose anymore. So we needed to make sure we changed, and we needed to change to be in line with the business. Otherwise, the business would have left us behind and started maybe outsourcing IT on their own, and started using third-party providers to provide their services. So we needed, as an IT organization, to start providing services that the business want. You know, I was thinking about real-world examples and maybe something that people could understand. If I was, say, the CIO of Argos, and Argos decided they want to move to a more Amazon-like model and shut a lot of their non-performing shops and go more online, you know, the CIO wouldn't say, oh, now's the time to hire 20 field support engineers to manage these reducing number of sites. They would invest in the cloud, they would start investing in web services, mobile services, etc., you know, looking at different applications that could be sold to users as a value for IT to give to the business. So I think, you know, you need to, it is key. If you don't support what the business wants, you will be left behind. So this is one of the main reasons you need to be aligned with the business.
Yeah. Now I've got a whole list of questions I'd like to ask Mark, but before I go into them, Zoe, have we got any questions from the audience that we can ask Mark?
Hi, yeah, we have got one here. It's asking really about the sort of contradicting priorities that you might get from different departments within a business. How do you deal with that?
So I think, sorry,
go ahead, David.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to maybe tease up. Well, when you say constricting, so I'm assuming the question is about the challenge of change within the business, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it
I
says...
would see that as a challenge to prioritize. You know, you have a limited number of resources, and what we kept doing and what we have to continue to do is go back to the IT strategy, which was built on the business strategy, and make sure that what we are doing is aligned. And if we have conflicting priorities, then it needs to go to, you know, I wouldn't say arbitration as such, but definitely we have to, what we used to do was put a decision tree together and look at the cost benefit of each of the priorities, and you know, if it can fit into the 4-year plan, into the roadmap of projects, that would be great. But sometimes you just have to make a decision to say, no, we can't do that this year. Maybe we can do it in 2016 or 2017, but definitely we don't have resources for that, and we need to prioritize. There's only so many things we can do, and we found in the past if you try and do everything that the business wants, you end up doing everything badly. So you need to, you know, prioritize and make sure you're using your limited resources wisely. And I know it's not a great answer, but there is a lot of work in the background to see, and you know, sometimes you just need someone to make a decision, whether it's the CIO or whether it's someone above the CIO, to say, okay, cut that project, we'll do it a different way.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because you mentioned a couple of things. You certainly went through the dependencies. So, you know, that those business needs, that whole group of sort of an ecosystem of dependencies to understand that will support the right outcome. And I think part of that, which was very clear, Mark, was the stakeholder management. So how did you approach sort of stakeholder selection, stakeholder management, stakeholder engagement? How did you approach that?
Well, we had a number of different directors and all of our different IT streams, so we all got together in a nice hotel in Paris, and we had you know, a 2-day, 3-day workshop where we talked about various different things in IT, and we had a half a day on KPIs, and we also invited some of our business representatives as well, so some of the key opinion leaders, and we asked for their input. And this was really useful to see what the outsiders looking into IT really thought about what was important to measure in IT. And they didn't come up with anything really surprising, but they did have a different emphasis on, you know, customer feedback. They said, you know, we don't mind giving customer feedback as long as it's acted upon, and that's something that sometimes is forgotten. You measure your customer feedback, but you don't do anything with it, or at least you don't do anything visible with it. You need to feed back to the business that they know that their feedback is being listened to. So it was to make sure you get the right voices, and voices from different areas, so all of the different IT departments were able to give input, and not only the management but also the people on the desks. You know, we really want to get their feedback as well. And one of the metrics that we were thinking about is, and something that we might introduce in the future, is our agent satisfaction level. So this is quite important as well, to motivate people, to make sure that the agents are happy, you know, that we're not just piling more and more work onto the agent, more and more performance-related KPIs, but we're not making sure that they are actually motivated and performing well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. And I think that to carry on with that line of question, because I'm really interested in how you managed all our stakeholder stuff and pointed it in the right direction. I'm sure a lot of businesses, organizations out there, aren't as don't do that as well, maybe. I mean, you mentioned obviously in the reference to the ambition that there didn't say anything about IT in there at all. It didn't say anything. So, you know, in your experience, I suppose, and following from those questions, how do you connect that sort of strategic disconnect between IT and the rest of the organization, where it exists? How do you do that?
I suppose if I think about the you know, the voice to customer meetings we held, and you know, we also sent surveys to the users to see where they thought the weaknesses were. But for me, you know, it is quite difficult. It's a difficult and very complex operation, and we did use consultants for the very high level part. So if you're a big organization with budgets, you can do that sort of thing. But what I really is when you're looking at some of the high-level business objectives. You know, for example, we want to grow in APAC region, we want to grow in the US. So that means investing in those areas and putting you know, IT infrastructure in place, putting IT organization in place. So that's quite, you know, quite straightforward. You think you want to grow in the US, you might as well, you know, put resources there instead of putting resources in place you're not growing. If you want to make IT services available to our partners, you know, you have to do something about your security systems. We had a very, very closed and very high level of security where everyone needed to, you know, there was 3 levels of security to get into the IT data or to get into the business data. Now it's much more open and much easier to get in, and we've created layers of security internally, you know, so people can get in access on iPads, tablets, etc., mobile phones, whereas previously before it was only an Ipson laptop, you know. So that was something that came out of the business strategy. If you want to grow quickly and you want to involve your partners, you want to involve your customers as well in your organization, you need to start opening up, and that's what we had to do. We had to look at our security. So not just on the service side. The service side was a little bit easier, I suppose, than some of the other big decisions to make. We really just wanted to improve our service and to make it consistent across all of the organization. So this is the way we did it. There was some other harder decisions to make about the digital strategy in Ipsen and the organizational strategy as well, which was, you know, there was some big changes made which you know, weren't very popular, but were needed in order to support the business.
Thanks for that. So have we got any other questions from the audience?
Yes, there's one here from Paul who's asking, did you have problems measuring right first time, one of the KPIs that you mentioned, Mark? It says, how do you define right, and did staff have conflicts?
It was quite easy actually, right first time. We didn't want to complicate it by having to analyze the tickets, so we just said if a ticket was resolved and reopened, and we got a flag in our tool if a ticket has been reopened, we just measured the number of tickets that have been reopened. So it was that was quite an easy one to measure, and then we can actually extract those reopened tickets and see what happened, why were they closed in the first place, and why were they reopened. So sometimes it's you know, a user might have rung up about a particular issue and thought it was fixed because they were asked to do something, but then it had to be reopened because the issue didn't really go away, or sometimes the service desk carried out the wrong fix. So there was a way for us to ensure that the right fixes were put in place.
Brilliant. Any other questions that we?
Yep, there's one here that's, oh, bear with me for a second. It says, how important is automation in IT service strategy?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, this was really linked to our shift left strategy as well. We wanted to automate as much as possible, so we put in a lot of, you know, well, I suppose self-service password resets, things like this was an automated service, and this saves us a huge amount of money, and also it's available 24/7, which in our previous model we didn't have a 24/7 service desk, so in our new model we do now. We have a 24/7 service desk, but it means that, you know, every time a user is locked out, they can unlock themselves in a few clicks using their smartphone or their PC instead of having to ring the service desk. I'm trying to think of other automation we've put in place. It's not really related to service desk, but we do automate the rollout of patches and software, and you know, building new machines, things like this. So this was something that was put in place over the last couple of years in order to bring consistency across all of the end user devices. And you know, we use mobile device management, etc. So there's a lot of automation that happens in the background. So we're implementing new tools. We always try and automate as much as possible. We run pilot testing to make sure everything is working on a small scale, and before we roll out. So we find that automation decreases the level of support required and the level of calls you get to the service desk. Although the big problem with automation, if you get it wrong, everyone is affected, which we found recently with a patch that really affected the authentication for all of our Ipsen users. So that was a major incident a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, brilliant. I suppose, you know, in that automation thing, I suppose, again, it depends on the direction of the business. It depends on the investment, the return on that investment. So many dependencies there, but it's certainly it's a fantastic point to add to how to get to an outcome that's designed for the business. We're getting very close to the end of this, guys. Zoe, I'm sure we've got a few more questions there, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to take some of those questions and feed them back into Mark. To get some answers to maybe share with our community via LinkedIn, etc.
Yes, what we do is we can put that on a blog, and then I can send the link straight out to that for everyone who's registered.
Brilliant. And just one more question for me, if I may, Mark. Actually, it's where you are now, I suppose. One thing, obviously, is how you've used all this stuff to market what you do internally and externally, and certainly how you are a better service now. So, you know, what it's meant to your customers, what's it meant to your business, has that been recognised from both?
Yes, as well, on a site level, a lot of our sites, they have metrics boards, especially the manufacturing sites. So to be able to get reports to put up on metrics boards to show the business how we're performing on a weekly or monthly basis is really important, and it doesn't take time to create these reports anymore. And we're able to not only in IT service, but we're also presenting on SharePoint sites, etc., and through various different posters and online notice boards and things like that. We're presenting what we're doing in an application point of view, what we're doing from the infrastructure point of view. So this was one of the new CIO who joined about 2.5 years ago, and really made IT more visible across the company by having webinars, by putting a lot of information about IT freely available, much more visible. You know, we have a portal now on the company intranet, whereas previously when I first started, you know, to get any real estate on the company intranet, you needed to know the CEO directly. You know, whereas now we can ask for space, and you know, we're getting our space there. We're getting our name known. We're also using Yammer, which is I don't know if you're familiar with Yammer, but it's similar to LinkedIn or Facebook for businesses. So it's an Ipsen only in a business intranet or business social networking site.
Brilliant. And I think it's clear. What's been clear to this to me is the communication, collaboration, connection, those big C words, which is great. So, well, it's been a great session. Thank you for sharing this story, Mark. It's been really very interesting to listen to. Thank you for joining us. Thank you also to our listeners for joining in and getting involved. And obviously very much, absolutely. And thanks to Zoe for managing this, and obviously Landis for sponsoring it too. So we're finished for the day, guys. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope you've learned something, and we hope to see you again on the next SDI webinar. So good afternoon, everybody, and good day. Thank you.